Alright, you mob. I've made a bit of a feed. I think we've all made something to eat. So I've got flathead here.
Oh, look at that.
I've got everything's native inspired, but what you'd normally eat on your dinner.
And I'm bringing along some cultural food from Ireland, which is not very cultural. It's just some normal potatoes and some beans with some garlic. So, so it's a bit of the heritage from my cultural background.
I like them. So
and I didn't go to a Scottish restaurant, so there's no McDonald's.
all good. Now, Kaki had something very, very popular from the Himalayas and bringing some momos. It's called momos, it's dumplings. But the dumplings have become synonymous in the Himalayan region, whether it's Bhutan, Tibet, Nepal, and northern part of India also. And in East Asia, China, Japan, you eat dumplings, so dumplings have become so synonymous.
Did you bring enough?
Yeah, I think so. Here comes John. Here is my contribution. That's all right. I'll get my contribution here. So what I got here is fusion. So my partner is a great cook. So she said, all right, what can I do? She's got what was there and she's put it all together. So it's tofu, mushrooms, carrot, in panko flour, and the sauce is like pesto with hazelnuts and basil. Done.
Very nice.
That's my wife's job here.
Oh, is that?
That's exactly that.
For the what? What's for the rice?
So thank you, Uncle Greg and Uncle Wes, for the welcome earlier. I think every single time we have that, it creates a space where you feel welcome. And I think some of the words that you said today really resonates with us, and people doing it for the first time walking through the smoke is really powerful. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for joining us for this lovely meal today. And here, like, what we're doing is having this conversation, sharing stories to try and understand better about what does this place look like today. People from different places arriving at different times, and what does this mean for us over a meal, and then also going forward, thinking about things like reconciliation. What's the education process for us? So thank you for that, and we'll just keep that conversation going. And I think one thing is the audience that will be watching this later is seeing a welcome, an acknowledgement. Would you be able to explain maybe why the difference between the two and why it's so important?
What's that?
A welcome to country, and then an acknowledgement of country.
Well, acknowledgement, you don't have to be Aboriginal. But when you're an Aboriginal person, it's the Aboriginal person that does that.
Yeah.
But that person has got to be from that country. It's not a person from another country to do that. Because it's not their job. We have direct people here doing welcomes, but they're not allowed to do that because it's not their country. It's their country, but they're not allowed to do the welcomes or the acknowledgements, and that's the difference. So we're out there, we're doing a lot of work. We come across a lot of idiots, Uncle? People out there doing welcome the countries, and they're not supposed to do that.
Uncle Greg, sorry if I can just interject here. Whenever you're at an event, obviously you guys do the welcome to country for everyone and the smoking and that. But let's just say, which would never happen because if you were there out of respect, you do it. But events that we've been to, how do you feel like, for example, if I am talking now and you weren't here, I would generally say in a big meeting setting, like, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land if you weren't here. And then I would expect that the next speaker would also acknowledge that we're on direct land, just out of respect. Do you agree with that, or do you think that shouldn't happen at all?
No, I agree with that.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
I could not so much. But I do honestly think that you live on direct land, you should be able to claim it. This is my land.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which I agree, but don't.
Does it
Yeah,
get you
I'm-
fired up when you hear someone else do the acknowledgement and you know
They don't have
personally
never
deep
had it.
down that they don't understand acknowledgement, or they just don't have the credibility in doing it? They're just doing it for the sake of doing it? How,
And what they've done when they had bounties on the women and kids' head here in Sydney alone. You know what a bounty is? So much money to kill women and kids, Aboriginal women and kids. That sort of
Uncle,
stuff.
it's absolutely
And
horrific. But Uncle,
see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It wasn't needed. You didn't have to do that. Because, you see, our traditions, our main tradition is sharing.
And sharing
Sharing.
stories.
Yeah, nobody is allowed to be left behind. Everybody, like for instance, to say, if a mother dies in the night, in the morning somebody else had the baby.
Yeah.
Somebody else had it, you know. See, and that was a big reason why, like, if your mother has 3 sisters, you have 4 mothers. Did you know that? 4 mothers. And you class them as mum, and they look on you as son, they look after you, you look after them. This is the thing of tradition of, what they call it, anyway, looking after each other.
Yeah.
Nobody went without it, but, and the thing was that when the food skin was put on the ground and the food was on it, what was collected for the day, if it's not enough to go around, the hunter's got to go without, because he has the ability to go out and get his own, you know, he can go out and kill. And see, Dreamtime stories have a lot to do with these sort of things, you know what I mean? Why? And why don't, you know, like why the possum up the tree? Because he stole all the food.
Yeah.
And he hid in the tree. That was his
Comes at night,
punishment.
yeah.
That's his punishment. And
you know what, Uncle? You know what you're making me think of? Like, a lot of people think what happened to Indigenous people of Australia, Aboriginal people of Australia, was so long ago. But you're sitting at this table with us, telling us not just stories, but your own. You lived it. You ate the food off the possum skin. You
Oh, yeah.
went there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I use Daryl as an example because, I mean, Daryl was born in 1960. Anyway, so he was 6 years old before he was classified not as being fauna in this country. So prior to that, I mean, have you ever got fined for mowing your front yard? You've got to keep your yard. But if you were classified as even though you know you're a human, but you were fauna, what trouble can you get in for killing an Aboriginal when they're only plants? You don't. Do you understand? So it was pretty tricky. And so Daryl was 7 years old. How were you when the referendum came and you could be a human being and not fauna? How old?
well, I don't know how.
It's
what it is.
1967.
That was in 1967.
Yeah.
So that I would have been 40 odd years old.
Wow.
40, 50 years.
Were you in the
Uncle Greg,
negative?
How old were you?
No,
Me, in when?
67.
67 I was
67. That I would have been 45.
67 I was,
So 9.
no, 20,
Your 20s.
26, 28.
Yeah, wow. But it's but people always say with Aboriginal people that it was in the past or so long ago, which brings us back to this meal thing, because obviously we're all from different countries. Mecca here looks after refugees, New Australians, and people like here who obviously wasn't born in this country.
Yeah.
So what brought you to this country? Like why? What was the sort of the thing to there?
Okay, I think we have to go back to
Well, yeah.
Yeah, go back a little bit, yeah.
go back a little bit. I don't know if everyone here would have heard about Bhutan, which is a very small country. It's a kingdom in the Himalayas, and it's known for gross national happiness. But the government implemented a policy of ethnic cleansing, and people from ethnic Nepali background were driven out of the country. That's when I had to flee the country, leaving behind my wife
really?
and
Wow.
two-year-old daughter. So, and my father was put in prison, tortured very badly. Fortunately, Uncle
In Bhutan.
he's 93 and a half now. Of course, when he's open his shirts, I can see scars all over his body. But he revisits that pain and suffering when the army tortured him. But he's, for his age, he's doing well, and we are very lucky to have him with us. And my mom is turning 90 soon. So that's how my father was put in prison, tortured very badly a number of times. When he fled the country to save his life, then I was a civil servant. I was head of a planning department in Bhutan Telecom, and I was kept under surveillance for a year. For 1 year, I
Wow.
couldn't leave the capital city without permission from the palace. So I had to live in terror every single day. Any single day we see someone in uniform. It was just terrifying, and they were all friends. Mind you, it's a small place, and you didn't know when you would be next. And once you get into prison in Bhutan, you'd never be seen, and there's no visitation right. So that's how when I learned that I was going to be arrested, then we decided that okay, I flee the country first, and then see if we can save. So the best thing for me left was to leave behind my 2-year-old daughter and my wife and run away. So that's how I saved my life, and fortunately they were able to join me later. And then I spent the next 6 years volunteering in refugee camps in Nepal, so setting up schools and hospitals, helping to do that. And then after 6 years, I was a little crazy as a refugee. I wanted to do an MBA because I'm a telecom engineer, but I wanted to do an MBA, so I just sort of dreamt about it and made it happen. Came to UTS and did my MBA, and then dream come true. Again, I feel honored to be sitting in front of you, Uncle Greg and Uncle Wes. Like this country has given me a new life all over again. So, my family has come, my wife and daughter have come, my parents are here now. So, we are so fortunate. So, I just want to start by saying thank you, Australia, and thank you, everyone for welcoming. And as you said, Uncle Greg and Uncle Wes, like allowing us in that circle, because welcoming us in that circle. So, I feel truly privileged to be in this country.
I agree with all this stuff, but so you talk, when I was young, and I come from southern Queensland, and they police brought us down order in 1932 to New South Wales, and you understand we lived in a tribe, and when we got to a little place called Bonshaw, they split us up. 3 people, 3 families this place, 3 families to Inverell, 3 families to Armidale, 3 families all over the place, you see. And they sent us to a mission. And you know what a mission is? It's like a concentration camp. And when I was a boy, we go to town, you used to have to wear a tag around your neck that says this boy is an Aboriginal and he has to be back on the mission by 5 o'clock. Do you know that in those days at 4 o'clock in the afternoon the police would go through the town and push every Aboriginal person out? No Aboriginal there after 4 o'clock. And that we went to, I don't know whether you're into it, but the mission was, the good thing about the mission was it had a river running through it, the Severn River. And being a boy, a young fella, swimming and fishing, and there was no school. I never went to school, I had no education. But
Thanks for sharing, Uncle Wes.
But I learnt how to survive. I learned how to steal the sheep over the next man's fence.
Don't worry, we won't chase you up on that one. I might get you later.
We're going back between the past and the present. And police has come up a bit here, Bob. And you mentioned it before as well about what it was before. But what are some of the things that you could say? We're doing better now. As at least locally, because you can't speak for the whole police force. But I mean, maybe locally, what are some things that you're proud of that you can say we're doing better now?
what we're doing better now and is we're acknowledging some of the things that we didn't do right in the past. And we did some terrible things to people. And we did some terrible things to people acting on behalf of the government at the time. But that's not to take away some of the actions of police officers. We've changed a lot, I think. I'm proud to say that I work with the iProud students. We're encouraging people from the Aboriginal community to become police officers, as well as all communities to become police officers. Because I think this uniform needs to reflect the community. So it can't just be a white uniform. Someone who's white in a uniform. It needs to be a Koori in the uniform. It needs to be someone from Nepal. It needs to be someone from East African nations. It needs to be someone from the whole community to reflect that community. Because the community feels safe if they know they can trust the uniform, but more importantly, trust the person inside the uniform. That's what it's about.
And I think that uniform, the trust that you mentioned before, like, how's it been for you? You know, you said you were fearful back there. How's it been for that transition to then come here and then see that uniform? Has it been a challenge at some point? Has it been easy?
It's been really challenging, not so much for my generation, for me, because we are sort of able to adapt, but for our seniors, like especially for my parents, for example, my father, for example, who has gone through that torture and trauma, it was very difficult. So one of the first things we did was, Mark Wright was the commander at Blacktown. So with Mark, we initiated a program where all those new arrivals would visit the police station, sit on the commander's chair, sit on the cap. And today I was talking about, coming here and sharing this session with Bob, and my niece was saying, "Oh, I've taken a photo with him." And now, we're trying to connect that with the community, and people do understand that police are our friends, not to be feared, And the other thing, at the national level, I think I sit on Police Commissioners Advisory Council, and that's the best thing I've seen. In many countries, this doesn't happen anywhere else. So I think the police is trying to make a concerted effort to change the way policing is done in this country, because we got this multicultural advisory council, which advises the commissioner. So we sit next to the commissioner, we co-chair meetings, and then we provide our feedback and suggestions as to what could be changed in the community. So this is just a fantastic open way of making those changes happen, I think.
Okay. And how about for young people? Because I guess that's something probably is still that fear for young people, young people from Aboriginal kids, African background, still being targeted, in certain ways, and also the media as well. Yeah. So is there some more things that you talked about that program? What would be some other things that you could say that there is some improvement to be made, things that we can do?
There are some improvements, but there's a point I need to sort of make as well. When you hear of a bad news story on TV where someone's been arrested or there's been some heinous crime somewhere, Western Sydney's always tainted from Western Sydney. Yeah. It's never identified as this offence occurred in, say, Pyrmont or Blacktown or Rose Bay or Bondi. They say Western Sydney or South Western Sydney. So people in the northern areas and eastern areas get this perception that all crime happens out here. Yeah. And they get a little bit narky about the good people, because at times we are a robust community out this way. But as far as I'm concerned, this community in Western Sydney, and it includes all communities from Parramatta to Penrith to the Blue Mountains down south, virtually includes all communities, no matter where it is. 998 people in every 1,000 is a decent person, absolute decent person, and they try their best to make their lives better for themselves. And obviously you're going to get a couple of people that cause grief. But with the police and youth, you have to ask the question sometimes, what's happening to parenting too at this stage? Why are these kids out at this particular time at night? And why are these kids allowed to take drugs? Or another important question is, why are so many children now in group homes? When these kids get to a group home, the group homes try to help them, but a lot of time I think it hurts them because they continually abscond from the home, they're getting out to public, they don't have that parenting and that support around them. And I think the family makeup hasn't broken down, but I think some areas, family and relatives and the community need to come together to support the children. It's like you were saying, Uncle, about a child being born into the mob, not just not having one mother, but having the whole women in that mob, helping and bringing up that child. Whereas I think we're starting to lose that in some of our youth. And I think some of our youth are so connected these days with technology. They are on phone, they're on Twitter, on Facebook. Yeah, they've got everything there, but they're so disconnected from each other.
Yeah.
That's the big problem. Yeah. And this bullying in technology, it's bigger than what we believe. Because the kids won't talk to mum and dad, and they won't talk to maybe some of the youngs or some of the people who they talk amongst themselves, and they send these that's harsh, a lot of negative messages across to each other, and becomes a little bit like a group bullying. And I see it reflected in young people taking their lives. I see it in young people starting to have mental illnesses at a very, very early age. And so we do have a lot of issues, and now police, we try to help everybody. We deal with traffic and mental health, and we try to make sure our community is safe, and we just can't do it alone. We need the whole community. We need the families, we need the parents, we need the uncles, we need the good community, we need the not-for-profits, the charities, all the help to come together to solve some of these issues. But with youth, mate, in the 60s I was a mongrel, I must admit, and I've been detained a few times for doing some naughty things too, but back in those days it was different. And I saw the light. I was forced to see the light through the government. They sorted me out pretty quick smart, and things changed for me. Whereas if they didn't change from what happened to me, I would be called what we call people who commit a lot of crimes these days as high risk offenders. I would have been classified as a high risk offender back in the 60s and 70s for some of the stuff I did. But things happen, things change, and we need to find those changes for some other people. Police do not.
Your mother, but you also bring food, and you got a really good starting point there, where it's like, you know, when people talk about Harmony Day, it's often let's start with food, but it often ends there. And I think what's really important, your food goes beyond that because it starts the conversations.
Oh God, love you. I want to get into it, but I just want to talk about what Bob just said about the bullying on the internet, because that does break our harmony in each home. My actual daughter had somebody tell her to drink bleach, like a group of them, to kill herself. So, you know, you find she did it, obviously. But
how old was she?
12. Wow. Okay, and then over the years, people have, to the point she doesn't even go on Messenger and stuff. She's petrified of him. But that's how it gets them. They get up, bully them on. It's horrific. You know, you're not thin enough. You're not whatever enough. Where before you only cared what your friends or your partner wanted. Now you put a picture of a knife up and people tell you it's up, it's down, it's whatever. You know, like it's red, it's green. You can't get anything right. But when it comes to food, my mum always said the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So I couldn't resist saying it.
And some of us have big stomachs. Is that what you're saying?
God love it.
All right, I'll go down on the diet.
Where's my husband? He's got a nice big belly. I love it. But no, I'm passionate. When Daryl and myself started doing catering, it was on a very small scale, and we did sandwiches and things like that for some of the community places around here. It was only a very small little niche business, and then my husband's family's from Wreck Bay, and his uncle sat down and he said to us, you know, he'd poke me in the eyes with 2 fingers if Daryl and I didn't start doing native foods. He goes, because it's going to disappear. If it wasn't for the likes of Uncle Greg and Uncle Wes giving us knowledge, the other kids don't know. We were really fortunate that Uncle Barry Moore was a bush tucker man and took us out bush, told us what we could eat and things like that. And I'm really fortunate. I have dreams about recipes, so I will go to sleep and I'll wake up with a new. It's bizarre. I have no explanation, but they work. But yeah, so we started taking in, and then community people like Uncle Greg being really kind. We did have a cafe in Piermont, but the people that were in Harris Street there was a massive one. Decided that they did not like Aboriginals hanging out in Piermont and asked us to get out. So it was a really sad situation, but we're now in Rudy Hill, which is great for us because it's where our family and that was. We we don't open to the public, obviously, because we were in between like NITV and ABC, so lots of the actors, actresses and people that work there would come and sit there, and obviously they're black, so we want them there, and they really did not like it.
But you've got some good neighbours in Rooty Hill, mate,
We
haven't you?
love, actually, to be honest with you, we love this community. Mind you, saying that Uncle Greg from the start supported us. He came out when the cafe was there because we lived in Rooty Hill, and Uncle was at everything we've done. So it's
Like I know for myself, when I many years ago I was held up at gunpoint, and guys in balaclavas, and when I got taken to the police station at the time, the questioning was very much about racial profiling. I said, and I couldn't see, it was balaclava, gloves, couldn't see a thing. I said, first thing, was he Aboriginal? And I said, no. I said, was he Lebanese? I said, no. And they said, because it was the area that I was in, so it was those sort of areas. Was he Islander? I said, no. And they just kept on asking me those questions. And it made me, and that was a point for me to just realise, my point of privilege, because I never get asked that as a white person to say, what, is it going to be a white person there? So I've never had that same level of fear, and so it made me sort of understand differently through the experiences of others. And I remember years later I had to go into court, and they had a young Aboriginal man there who I was the witness for, and the way that I was being asked by the lawyers, it was also the same thing, trying to get me to say this thing, to put this person away, and I'm like, I don't know who it is. And I was really being pushed into a position where they made me feel like I had to respond in a certain way. And it was years later, and I was so confident it wasn't that person. But it was such a eye-opener for me to see how sometimes that system can work, and how privileged I am, in a place like this. Because it doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to my kids. And, it's definitely something, you talked about that thing about Harmony Day or what it is, and I think the idea of harmony is great. I'd love to see harmony, but how do we get there? And I think that's where it's like these real conversations, hearing these stories and going, we've got a lot better to do, and there are differences in opportunities, differences in the structures that hold people down, give people opportunities. So I think it's great that we're having this, and people to understand that there's these different experiences based on what you look like, based on your culture, based on these things, and how do we work towards improving that? I don't know, if we it's that idea of the altruism of harmony. How do you see us getting there, Om?
For me, I think it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And I come from an experiential perspective, I'm not an expert here, but then I bring my own experiences to how it could be. And I'm the most recent migrant here, so I can see, if I tell my story is just 22 years old in this country. But then I have the privilege of building on the indigenous 60,000 years history. And we have got the privilege of today, on sitting with, Uncle Wes and Uncle Craig and Nene here, I think. I think that's where I want to, I'm a science student. Having studied simplification in mathematics, I try and apply that in my inner engineering. So having moved from, telecom engineering to inner engineering now, in how can we build from inside out. So I think Daniel and I we worked on this for a number of years now. I really strongly believe in trying to simplify this and go forward with a 3-story nation. I really like that idea because, if we, as the most recent migrants, start building our story on the indigenous history, and if we learn more about it, then we get to appreciate more and understand our history. And then let's look at the luxury that we have today. I think our generation has seen the external luxury, the comfort and convenience in this world, never experienced or seen by any other generations. I think, even our kings and royalties 50 years ago couldn't imagine this kind of luxury that we have today. If I live now and I can put on a switch and how my house will cool, things like that. You can never imagine those level of comfort. But then, can we claim to be the most peaceful or most loving generations? Maybe not. So that's why I think we have to really start focusing on inner self, and that's what I'm on a journey of inner engineering and trying to see where can I start harmonies within myself. If I'm joyful and happy, I think I can contribute something externally. But if I'm agitated and if I'm not joyful myself, so every single day I try and make that decision to see what difference I can make in terms of creating a better, harmonious society in this world. And I think my starting point is just myself. What difference can I make? And if I can make my contribution, I think I can help create a better environment at home and within the community and expand that way. Otherwise, it's too big an issue. And if you start looking at the problem, it's too big a problem. So the way I start is looking at the strengths and what's working within the community. And going to elders, for example, we go and ask what's working in this community. What can we do? So youth problem is one of that. We try and advise young people. We try and tell them to be engaged somewhere. But have we gone to the community and asked the elders, what would work in this community? Rather than having experts with PhDs go and do things, if you go and listen to our elders in the community, in any community, I think there will be a lot of solutions. So how do we value the local? It's about valuing the local, building on the strengths that is already there in the community. Rather than finding what's broken in the communities, trying to find out what's working in the community. What are the strengths in the community? What's working in the community? And let's help nurture that and do more of what's already working in communities. I think that's one way to address this, I think. And that's my experience working with a lot of refugees and migrants, and I work across different communities. And otherwise, if you start looking for problems, there would be too many problems. So how do you start building on strengths and assets that's there already in the community?
Out there that impact upon all communities. The idea of harmony to me is yes, taking the advice of respected elders, but we also got to take the advice of the people that matter too, as well as the youth, as well as people with disabilities. Because harmony to me is not just about getting on, it's about everyone, irrespective of colour, race, culture, physical ability, disability, intelligence, where you come from, where you're born. That to me is harmony. It's mate, I'm no better than anyone else here, and no one else here is better than me. That's how I look at life. That's an equality thing for harmony in my view, and I try to develop that into my officers, that just because we wear a uniform doesn't mean we're better than any one person out on the street. It's a matter of us working with those people on the street. It's a matter of us working with respected elders for their sage advice and about their history. It's about us also asking the question of the youth. What is the answer? Because they've got the say in this. And it's about people with disabilities. It's about what is the answer to people with disabilities being able to go into a shop with autism and not have people look at it, not have people talk about it, or people in a wheelchair go somewhere and people go, oh yeah, or people with a missing arm or a limb or something, without
even mental disease.
And people, families that can proudly walk into any shop, into any location, in any park, or sit down at any table at a picnic bench with their children or with their uncle or with their auntie who may have dementia, and being a family and being a part of the community. That's how I look at it. And I think it's
nice, wouldn't it?
It would be, and that's to me, this thing about harmony is it's like the relationship between police and the Aboriginal people. It's going to be generational. It has to be. We can't say, okay, let's have harmony, wave the flag, and next day we're in the harmony. It's not going to work like that.
And that's a great point, because I think sometimes we have this harmony day, one day a year, or maybe a week, and then it's forgotten. It's like we have this one celebration day, and then it's gone. And we have to make it like in everything we do.
Live it.
Exactly.
I think
We have to be the difference out there.
I think we all have to look on each other as equals.
Absolutely.
We've got to come together, and until we come together, reconciliation.
Guys,
Thank
what a
you.
pleasure
Thank
having
you all to help us out there.
Thank you, guys.
Well done, guys. Thanks. Really appreciate it.